In the spring of 2020, a woman in Phoenix named Carol drove to a storage facility she hadn't visited in 8 months. She had a 10 by 20 climate-controlled unit she'd been paying $189 a month on, packed after her divorce, never revisited. She found it unlocked. Somebody had cut the padlock and gone through it a week before the facility realized anything was wrong. Whoever it was took a flat-screen TV, a Vitamix blender, and a box of decorative plates. They left behind a full Berkey water filter, a 72-hour emergency kit still in factory packaging, a jet boil stove, and 8 cases of freeze-dried Mountain House food with a 25-year shelf life. They walked right past $600 in emergency nutrition because they were looking for things to sell. 6 weeks later, this was March of 2020, the first wave of pandemic panic buying. The shelves in that same Phoenix neighborhood were stripped bare. The thief took what looked valuable. Carol kept what was. I'm Max. And today, on Outfox Apocalypse, we are going to talk about the 52,000 self-storage facilities scattered across the United States. Each one holds an average of 500 units. Do the math, that is roughly 28 million individual storage units across this country. More doors than the population of most American states. More locations than every McDonald's, Starbucks, Dunkin Donuts, Pizza Hut, and Wendy's combined. 28 million boxes full of things people paid money every month to protect. And, specifically, we're going to talk about what is sitting inside those units right now that the resale crowd will completely miss when the grid goes down, the stores close, and cash stops meaning anything. By the end of this video, you'll know how to read a storage unit in 4 minutes. You'll know exactly which categories of contents have survival value versus resale value. And I'm going to give you a decision tree, a triage algorithm, that tells you what to grab, in what order, every single time. No nostalgia, no antique value, no eBay price check, pure function. Before we go further, one condition on everything that follows. This video operates in a single scenario. The rule of law has ceased to function. Not a power outage, not a supply disruption. I mean, courts are closed, emergency services have stopped responding, and civil authority has dissolved. Under any other conditions, accessing a storage unit you don't own is a felony, and criminal exposure is honestly the least of your concerns. The original owner may come back. Preppers cash because they expect to return to their cash. A man who packed a generator, a year of food, and firearms into a unit and paid monthly for 2 years does not forget what he left there. He will come back. He may already be there. Understand the risk as clearly as you understand the resource. Here's the mindset problem. Out of those 28 million units, roughly 150,000 go to auction every year, abandoned when someone died, divorced, went to prison, or went broke. Barely 0.5%. But think about what fills a unit when a life falls apart. The gear, the tools, the emergency supplies, the generator bought after the last ice storm. Things people couldn't bear to throw away. They stay there, sometimes for years. Television auction shows spent years training an entire generation of Americans to look at these units and calculate resale margin. Spend $400, flip for $1,200, pocket $8. The auction crowd thinks, what will someone pay me for this on the weekend? I think what keeps me alive in week 2 when there's no power, no supply chain, and the guy down the street is starting to look at my property with the wrong kind of interest. Those are completely different frameworks applied to identical raw material. In a post-collapse world, a vintage Tiffany lamp is worth exactly as much as the dry firewood you can burn under it. The people trained by resale logic walk past the actual gold, and I mean that almost literally. But at this point, I need to shift the frame. In the scenario this video is actually for, auctions don't exist. eBay is down. The people who arrive at these facilities after systemic collapse are not bidders. They're survivors operating on memory, calibrated to a world that no longer exists. 40 years of pattern recognition that says, television, valuable, and bin of chemicals, skip it. That signal doesn't switch off because the grid went down. Most people won't have time to update it. The gap you're going to exploit is not stupidity, it's a calibration lag. A mental map that hasn't been updated yet. Yours has. So let's talk about how you actually assess a unit before you ever touch anything inside it. But first, reconnaissance before approach. In the first 48 to 72 hours of systemic collapse, the unprepared raid grocery stores, pharmacies, and gas stations. Storage facilities are the second wave. The people who make that second move are thinking more clearly than average, which means they may be armed, organized, and running the same triage logic you're about to learn. Scout from a distance. Look for fresh tire tracks, watch for vehicles returning on a pattern, identify observation positions where you can see without being seen. The most dangerous moment in this operation is not inside the unit. It's the 60 seconds when you're focused on what's in front of you and not on what's coming from behind. Reconnaissance is a facility-level investment. You do it once, confirm the perimeter is workable, and identify which doors to prioritize. The 4-minute clock is per unit, per door, and it starts fresh only after the approach is cleared. You have 4 minutes per unit. This is your assessment protocol, 4 steps that tell you what you're dealing with before you commit to moving anything. First, is it climate-controlled or standard? Climate-controlled units are inside enclosed buildings. You walk through a main exterior door into an interior corridor with HVAC running. Standard units have roll-up doors that open directly to the outside. The facility map marks which is which. This matters because climate-controlled units, usually 10 by 10 or 10 by 20, costing $150 to $250 a month, attract people protecting things they actually value. Documents, electronics, quality clothing, medical supplies. Sometimes food storage, specifically from preppers who know that humidity destroys shelf life. A standard unit at $60 a month attracts different contents, tools, furniture, sporting equipment, automotive gear. Both are valuable in a collapse, just differently valuable. Second, smell the air when you open the door. This sounds ridiculous until you understand what you're detecting. The smell of petroleum products, oil, fuel, hydraulic fluid means tools and mechanical equipment are inside. The sharp chemical smell of gun solvent or hops number 9 means firearms and cleaning gear. Mildew means moisture intrusion, means any paper documents, clothing, or food is compromised. A clean, slightly stale smell in a climate-controlled unit is excellent. It means the contents were sealed properly. A musty, organic smell means biological degradation. Learn the chemistry of what you're sniffing, and you've just cut your assessment time in half. Third, look at the lock. This sounds like a criminal tip. It isn't. It's an engineering observation. A cheap combination lock or a contractor's padlock says the owner was not particularly security conscious. A Medico, an Abloy, or a heavy-duty disc lock, the kind that runs $40 to $80 at a locksmith, says the owner knew the value of what was inside and invested in protecting it accordingly. The quality of the lock is a proxy for the quality of the contents. People who put $25 padlocks on units full of junk are consistent in that logic. So are people who put $60 Abloy locks on units full of things worth protecting. Fourth, scan the organization. You can see a great deal from the doorway. Labeled plastic bins in earth tones, gray, olive, tan, typically indicate military, prepper, or serious outdoor enthusiast. Clear plastic bins with visible contents tell you immediately what's inside. Cardboard boxes that have been labeled in permanent marker and stacked with consistent spacing indicate a methodical person who packed things carefully because those things mattered to them. random furniture pushed in from the edges, garbage bags, cardboard crushed and stacked against walls. That's a reactive move. Someone grabbing things fast during a crisis. The methodical packer's unit will almost always contain higher value survival goods than the panic packer's unit. Now, let's go category by category, because this is where old world thinking diverges most sharply from survival thinking. Medical and chemical. This is your highest priority category and the one most consistently passed over. Why? Because most people won't know what they're looking at, and what they don't recognize, they won't stop for. A sealed, commercial-grade first aid kit from a construction site, the kind that costs $180 new, sits in a unit. Most people see a plastic box. What I see is 400 milligrams of ibuprofen in individually sealed packets, trauma dressings, quick clot combat gauze, nitrile gloves in multiple sizes, and a CPR mask. In a world without functioning emergency rooms, that box represents a capability most neighborhoods won't have. Look for anything that came from a professional environment: job site first aid stations, veterinary supplies, which are often chemically identical to human medications, just differently labeled, dental kit components, blood pressure cuffs, pulse oximeters. These last items cost $15 on Amazon before the collapse. After, they represent the only way you'll know if your neighbor's heart is beating effectively enough to survive exertion. Look for N95 respirators. They filter particulates and biological agents, and they have a functional shelf life well past their printed date if stored in sealed packaging. Look for activated charcoal, hydrogen peroxide, isopropyl alcohol at 91% or higher. These are not interesting to someone who has no framework for what they do. They are an emergency pharmacy to someone who understands basic medicine. The chemical category extends to agricultural and mechanical. Gallons of bleach, 8.25% sodium hypochlorite, are a water purification system. 8 drops per gallon of questionable water gives you 24 hours of protection. 1 sealed gallon of bleach handles roughly 3,800 gallons of water purification. An untrained eye sees $3 of cleaning supplies. You see water security for a small group for months. Energy and mechanical capability. This is the category where the gap between old world instinct and survival thinking is widest. Here's why. Most people understand what electronics are worth. They do not understand the operational value of mechanical capability when the electronics don't work anymore. A Craftsman or DeWalt generator stored in a standard unit, the kind that puts out 3,500 to 7,500 watts, is worth roughly $400 to $1,200 pre-collapse. Most people know to grab a generator. They'll fight over it. But here's what they miss: the 5-gallon containers of stored gasoline nearby, treated with PRIG fuel stabilizer, which extends shelf life from 90 days to 5 years. Someone thinking in pre-collapse terms grabs the generator and walks past the treated fuel. The survivor grabs the fuel first, because without it, the generator is a very heavy piece of sculpture. Hand tools. This is where I get almost emotional, because the ignorance here is profound. A quality hand plane, a Stanley No. 4 or a Lie-Nielsen, costs $45 to $350 new. But more importantly, it removes material from wood with 0 electricity, 0 battery, and 0 mechanical failure modes beyond the blade going dull. A set of chisels, a quality handsaw, a brace and bit drill set, a draw knife. These are pre-industrial manufacturing capability. They let you shape materials, build structures, create tools from raw components. Someone without this training sees old tools from a dead man's garage. The survivor sees a machine shop that runs on muscle power. Deep cycle AGM batteries, the kind used in RVs, boats, and off-grid solar systems, are particularly valuable and particularly overlooked. A Group 31 AGM battery holds roughly 100 amp hours of usable power. A bank of 4 of those, paired with an inverter, gives you a functional electrical system independent of the grid. They're heavy, ugly, not obviously valuable to someone without an electrical background. Someone with no framework for off-grid power moves past them. The survivor builds a lighting and communication system. Look for propane in any form. 1-pound canisters, 20-pound tanks, even the hoses and regulators. Propane stores indefinitely in sealed containers, unlike gasoline. A 20-pound tank holds roughly 420,000 BTU of heating and cooking energy. That's months of daily cooking for a household, or weeks of supplemental heating. Food and water capability. Let me be blunt, the calories stored in self-storage facilities across this country represent a meaningful fraction of national food security that most people have never considered. Preppers, and there are several million of them in the United States, disproportionately use climate-controlled storage units as second location food caches, precisely because home storage has limitations of space and temperature. A serious prepper's climate-controlled 10x10 unit will contain MREs, meals ready to eat, military spec, which provide 1,200 to 1,400 calories per meal in a completely self-contained package with a 5 to 7 year shelf life at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It will contain number 10 cans of freeze-dried vegetables and protein, Mountain House, Augustin Farms, Wise Company, with 25-year shelf lives when stored properly. It will contain water storage, 55-gallon food-grade barrels, water bobby bathtub liners, aqua tabs in sealed packaging. Here's the triage logic on food. Freeze-dried number 10 cans are your highest priority, maximum calorie density, multi-decade shelf life, and completely off the radar of most people who will pass through that door. Standard canned goods, beans, tuna, sardines, vegetables are second priority, heaviest per calorie and shortest shelf life. MREs require zero preparation and are self-heating, which makes them tactically excellent, but they are also the one category where you may face real competition. Military packaging is instantly recognizable. Even someone with no survival training reads military food from that packaging. Expect them to be contested, especially in the first wave. The number 10 cans they will ignore entirely, unglamorous, heavy, no obvious signal of value. That is exactly where your advantage lives. 25 pounds of freeze-dried food in a number 10 can represent 100 or more servings. More calorie-dense per pound than MREs, shelf life measured in decades rather than years. Water filtration equipment. A Sawyer squeeze filter, $30 new, filters 100,000 gallons of water over its lifetime. 100,000 gallons. Someone without this framework sees camping gear and moves on. You see a personal water treatment plant. A Berkey gravity filter system, Big Berkey, Royal Berkey, filters 6,000 gallons before element replacement and removes biological contaminants, heavy metals, and chlorine. New price runs $250 to $400. Most people won't recognize it or won't understand what it does. So far, we've covered the mindset shift from pre-collapse to survival thinking, the reconnaissance protocol, the 4-minute assessment methodology, medical and chemical priorities, energy and mechanical capability, and food and water systems. Now let's talk about the category that is most consistently undervalued by everyone, including most preppers. Before I give you the full triage algorithm: clothing, gear, and shelter systems. You've been warm your whole life because infrastructure worked. When it stops working, 40 degrees Fahrenheit at night in a house with no heat is 40 degrees Fahrenheit at night with no heat. The physics does not care about your prior comfort level. Hypothermia begins when core body temperature drops below 95 degrees Fahrenheit. It can happen in conditions you would have previously called chilly. This is not abstract. Storage units contain extraordinary sleeping and shelter gear. A North Face 0-degree sleeping bag, retail price $300 to $450, is rated to keep a healthy adult alive at 0 degrees Fahrenheit with no supplemental heat source. A Thermarest sleeping pad underneath it provides insulation from the ground, which conducts heat away from your body 25 times faster than air at the same temperature. These are engineering specifications. These are the parameters between comfort and hypothermia. Most people see camping equipment and move on. The survivor sees a 0-degree survival shelter that folds into a stuff sack. Quality rain gear. Waterproof breathable jackets, Gore-Tex, Event, similar membranes. Work because the pore size of the membrane is roughly 9 microns, which is smaller than a water droplet, but larger than water vapor. Your body can exhale moisture. Rain cannot enter. This technology keeps you dry, and staying dry in cold weather is the difference between maintaining core temperature and losing it. A used Arc'teryx or Patagonia hardshell in a storage unit looks identical to any other old jacket in a pile. Pre-collapse, it costs $400. Post-collapse, it is body armor against the weather. Look for military surplus gear specifically. MOLLE systems, web gear, military issue boots, engineered to specific load-bearing and waterproofing standards, wool blankets, which retain 80% of their insulating capacity when wet, unlike cotton, which retains approximately nothing, and ponchos with grommet systems that can be rigged as shelters. Military surplus is consistently undervalued because it's unfashionable and often worn-looking. It is consistently over-engineered relative to its cost. Bags and packs. A quality hiking backpack, Osprey, Gregory, Kelty, with an internal frame distributes load across your hips rather than your shoulders, allowing you to carry 50 to 60 pounds over distance without injury. The physics of weight distribution is not trivial. Carrying that same weight in a garbage bag or a suitcase with rollers over broken terrain is not an option. A quality pack is a mobility system. A duffel bag is a heap. They look approximately equally unimpressive to someone who doesn't understand the engineering difference. Now, the extraction sequence. Because all of this knowledge is academic without a decision framework that works under stress, in low light, with adrenaline in your system, and a clock running. You've already completed your 4-minute assessment. Unit type is identified. Smell is read. Lock quality is noted. Organization pattern is scanned. The assessment answered one question: is this unit worth committing to? The extraction sequence answers a different question: in what order do I move? Step 1. Medical first, always. Before anything else, locate and secure any first aid or medical supplies. These are irreplaceable, compact, and the lightest category relative to value. A first aid kit that fits in a day pack may be the most valuable 5 pounds you ever carry. Medications, trauma supplies, water purification chemicals. Get them first. Step 2. Energy and water capability. Fuel containers, propane, water filters, batteries. These are moderately heavy, and you may not be able to take everything, so prioritize by portability. A Sawyer filter weighs 3 ounces. A 20-pound propane tank weighs 38 pounds full. Triage accordingly based on your transport situation. Step 3. Food, then tools, then clothing. Freeze-dried number 10 cans first, then MREs if the first wave hasn't already cleared them, then high-fat canned goods. Then hand tools over power tools if electricity is unavailable. Then cold weather clothing, sleeping systems, and quality bags for carrying everything else. If you follow that sequence, you will never leave a unit having taken the television and left the medical kit. You will never grab the flat screen and walk past the Berkey filter. You will never haul out the vintage furniture and ignore the treated fuel cans. Because you are running a physics-based, calorie-counted, thermodynamics-aware triage system, not a pre-collapse value lookup. If you want to think clearly when everyone else is grabbing the wrong things, when the person next to you is hauling out a vintage record player while the generator fuel cans sit untouched 2 feet away, subscribe to this channel. Clear thinking, applied physics, and the risk calculus most people skip when clarity is the scarcest resource in the room. America has 28 million of these units. They represent a distributed network of stored capability, the accumulated preparations, collections, and lives of millions of people who paid monthly fees to preserve things that mattered to them. Most of that content will never be properly evaluated by the people who encounter it. Most of it will be mispriced, misidentified, and mishandled by people running old world logic instead of engineering logic. That's their problem. It doesn't have to be yours. Everything in this video is framed for a prolonged collapse scenario. But here's something worth knowing. You don't have to wait for the end of the world to start building this skill set. Storage unit auctions happen every week, in every state, and they are open to the public. 150,000 units a year. Most bidders are running resale logic. You now have a different framework. Nothing stops you from walking into a local auction next Saturday, bidding on a unit for $200, and walking out with a Berkey filter, a case of freeze-dried food, and a sleeping bag rated to 0 degrees. Things most people left on the table because they didn't know what they were looking at. Think of it as training. Think of it as stocking up. Either way, you're building capability while everyone else is building an eBay store. Remember the condition I stated at the beginning of this video. Everything here operates under one assumption: the rule of law has ceased to function. If courts are open, if emergency services are responding, if civil authority is intact, none of this applies. The legal exposure and physical risks I described at the start are real, and I meant every word. This is preparedness knowledge for the specific scenario where the legal and civil infrastructure no longer exists to protect anyone. Short of that threshold, stay home, stay safe. Max out.